Oh, hello. Good day. Yeah, my phone drew me to it. My phone drew me to it. It's sitting there on my computer. I was reminded that I have to record my video. I was a passerby before that until I started to look at my phone and, in this case, create media content. And this opens for us our final video lecture on our final piece of content as we're putting together this massive media system that we've been studying all semester long, looking at financing, looking at regulation, looking at philosophies, etc. And now we're going to study the audience for media. That is you. That is you as a representative of the people who access media content. And just like this phone drew my attention to it, a lot of media are static media. They're fixed. Like all the TV screens you see in Times Square, it's fixed. If you have a desktop computer, it's fixed. It's not moving around. So you go to it. You go to your TV to watch it in the evening. The TV does not follow you around. You're going to it. So certain media draw our attention to them, while other media are more mobile. Other media follow us as we go around in our daily lives. Like if you're driving in a car and you're listening to the radio, it's following you wherever you go. There is a static dimension of it in that it's fixed in your car, but it's much more mobile in terms of your use of it. It's following you around. Your phone is following you around all day long. You're constantly aware of how much battery you have and whether you can get to an outlet in whatever room that you're in because your phone is starting to run out of power. It is a device that has become the most following around medium that we could ever imagine in our lives because it's always in your pocket. In fact, you leave home without it, you feel incomplete, you feel anxious, you feel nervous. And so that is a device that's in your pocket, ready and willing to provide you with media content through social media, through news feeds, through email, texting, and all the other apps that we use on our phones. So let's take a look at the audience in the modern age and help point a way for you to do your country media posts that's going to allow you to learn about the audience within your country. I do want to say a word about the media audience, and you'll find this in the reading that's online from my book, the original book that I wrote that I adapted for this class. The media audience itself is a construct. It's a construct that's meant to describe how a group of people collectively behave when they access media content. But really the concept is false. It's artificial. And at no time has that concept been more artificial than today because of the way that people, the audience, can access media content. If you take a show like Orange is the New Black or Money Heist or The Ozarks, any show that's running on Netflix, that show technically has an audience that's watching it, but the audience is so varied in terms of how it's watching that show. Some people will binge watch. They'll cruise through an entire show, several seasons, several episodes in 2 to 3 days. It's like an obsession that they can't get enough with. Others will watch a show in the morning and only in the morning. That's the only time they're going to watch. Others will watch a show only in the evening. That's the only time they're going to watch. Still others will watch a show at any time that they want. Yet others will watch a show and then watch it again, and then watch it again. They'll watch it over and over, while others will only watch it once and say, no, I've already seen that, not interested in seeing it again. I'm focusing on watching here as a way of absorbing media content, but all these statements that I'm saying are also holding true for magazines and newspapers and radio. The audience today is very fragmented. It's watching media on its own terms. Media are pretty much self-serve, which is radically different from the time period I grew up in, with television, for example, and newspapers, where if you want to read a newspaper, you have to wait for it to come out. You're sitting there in your kitchen waiting for the thump on your front doorstep, knowing, the paper's finally arrived, now I can read it. Same with television. You want to watch a show on TV, it's on at 8 o'clock at night. That's the only time it's on. That's the only way that you can watch the show. Same with radio in a sense. You want to hear a song, a really popular song that's going around, you have to wait. You have to wait for that Demi Lovato song to come on because the radio station chooses for that song to come on for you. And so this is the old way versus the new way, where you can go onto your phone, you can grab stuff on YouTube, you can save stuff from your TV on TiVo and access it later. You can pretty much Google almost anything you want, and sometimes you have to pay for it. But you get to watch, read, listen, absorb media content when you want to, not when somebody else decides that it's time to deliver that content to you. So the audience today is really an artificial concept. It does not describe a lot of common sets of behaviors and habits and demographics of the people who are watching media. Yes, we can find characteristics. We can say that people who listen to country music might also be more likely to drive trucks. We can make some generalizations like that, but it's not so easy today because the audience is so fragmented. So just keep in mind that we are talking about a concept that is not necessarily as useful as it was in the past, the concept of the audience. Now, how do we learn about the audience in the world of media? Well, one way we can break down how organizations study media is by looking at private versus public firms. Private versus public firms. In other words, firms that produce information about audience access to media because they are obligated to do so because of a government mandate, and it's a public service that they're providing. They're showing how many youthful people are tuning into the BBC and how many elderly people are tuning into the BBC. And if there's a big drop off in youthful, then maybe the BBC needs to change some of its programming to better appeal to youthful people. That's public information. Doesn't cost anything. It's provided by the government. It's supposed to be unbiased, unfiltered, versus private firms that provide audience data. Like right here in the United States, the Nielsen firm. That's a firm that provides audience ratings for television and radio. There used to be another company in radio called Arbitron, which measured just radio ratings. These are done by filling out diaries for what radio programs you're listening to, what TV programs you're listening to, or carrying around what's called a personal people meter. Looks like a pager that you attach to your belt that picks up radio frequencies and then transmits back to a central headquarters that collects this data, that collects the data, and that firm compiles the data, and then it sells the data. That's what makes it private. It sells the data. Nielsen and Arbitron, which Nielsen bought, it's now just one monopoly in the United States, they sell Nielsen ratings. You know about the Nielsen ratings, right? The Nielsen ratings ranking the top 10 TV shows in the past week. That's probably what you're most familiar with, but Nielsen actually drills down much deeper into audiences, coming up with ages and genders and household incomes and levels of education and lots of other things having to do with audience interaction with media content. And yet those data are going to be biased, right? Would Nielsen ever produce data that show that the company itself is not viable? Would Nielsen ever produce data to say that, you know what, our data are invalid? We're finding that the sample size that we took a look at is not big enough or is skewed towards a gender or an ethnicity, so that what we're learning from these data does not really apply to the general population. No, you're not going to see that with a private firm. And so there are biases that creep in there. And furthermore, certain advertisers are also implicated in the biases of private data firms. If you have really big companies like Verizon and McDonald's and Geico, these are companies that we constantly see advertisements from in virtually every media platform. If we have those companies starting to show up, starting to see the audience data, I should say, are less than expected, that there are less people who are in the age bracket who would buy a dollar value menu McDonald's meal by virtue of listening to a radio program and then hearing an ad and then going to a McDonald's to purchase that meal. If that data is starting to decline and make it look like it's really not viable for McDonald's to keep purchasing advertising time, then the system would fall apart, right? So there's a bias within the private data system to keep it going, to keep Nielsen making money and to keep McDonald's making money. Yet another way that data are gathered is through media organizations themselves, especially big organizations. They are conducting focus groups. They are doing their own email surveys and their own web surveys and their own phone surveys. They are studying their audiences all the time. When you call into a radio station, if you do, it's not so likely anymore. You're not just calling in for content. You are also calling in because your information is being collected. Just like every survey, every account you set up, every login, every password you enter on the web, that's not just to get access. That is because you are being studied. It's amazing what people offer up. Even the privacy statement the privacy statement that you are provided with by Facebook. Here's our updated privacy statement. Click yes if you agree. You're still providing data. Now, we actually discussed this phenomenon in much more detail in classes like Dialogue and Social Media, another graduate class, and at the undergraduate level, we discussed that in Critical Perspectives on Social Media Use in our department. And so there are other avenues for this subject matter to be studied, but private organizations are also gathering data all the time, especially Facebook, the biggest advertising agency in the entire world, next to Google. Those two are the biggest advertising. Oh, you didn't know they're advertising agencies? You thought they were a browser and a social media network? No, they're ad agencies. That's what they're doing. They're trying to collect data from you all the time. All of these challenges going around on Facebook right now. I have been challenged to name the top 10 albums. I have been challenged to do this. Nobody's being challenged. That's a Facebook strategy to get people, because of their vanity, their need to be recognized by others, to post photos of their high school graduation or to take part in whatever music challenge is taking place, only so that they supply more data that Facebook can collect and provide to advertisers, which then come right at you with ads. I can tell you all over my Facebook right now is a bunch of ads for gardening stuff. Because of the pandemic, I was looking at getting a hold of some kind of a raised garden bed box that I could assemble and start to grow my vegetables. And that was a mistake. Everything I'm looking at on Facebook and a lot of it is spam. A lot of it is people trying to fish me. A lot of people is trying to tell me fake products. That's the way our world is working today with this fragmented so-called audience concept. Most of the data that is provided on audiences is quantitative. It's quantitative. It's numbers oriented. It's categorizing people in terms of the percentage of them who fall into this age bracket, the percentage of them who are this ethnicity, the percentage of them who have this religious belief. It's quantitative. It's numbers oriented. And a lot of decisions are being made on those numbers as to whether to keep a TV show on the air, whether to do a sequel to a film. This is how most of the media audience data is collected and used by media organizations. And it's unfortunate because really you can only learn so much by knowing that you have X amount of 18-year-olds listening to your radio station, X amount of 22-year-olds. It doesn't really tell you why they're listening. It doesn't tell you what their background is. It doesn't tell you what their thoughts and feelings are. So noticeably absent from audience data is qualitative data, is interviewing, is focus groups. It's understanding why people think, believe, and feel the way that they do. And the reason for that is because that's very expensive. It's very expensive to interview people, whereas you can go out and capture a whole bunch of people's opinions at one time in a simple survey that you send out and ask people to fill out in just a few minutes. So as we approach this subject in terms of your country media posts, what we are trying to do is take a rhetorical perspective. A rhetorical perspective is trying to look at the media selections that are offered in your country and then understand how those media selections invite the audience to gain meaning. That's what a rhetorical perspective is. It's looking at meaning, and it's looking at your media selections as an invitation. For example, you pick up a remote control in the United States and you start to go upwards, starting at channel 2, which is where your remote control might start you out at, unless it goes back to your last channel that you were watching. Either way, though, you start to scroll because you're bored, you've seen an episode before, or there's a lot of commercials running, you don't want to watch that, so you start to click the down channel button or the up channel button. What do you come across? What are you invited to take a look at? In the United States, you're invited to take a look at a lot of private, profit-making commercial programming. Even religion is that way too. On the weekends, when you have those televangelical presentations and money is being requested. And so are you really invited by the media system, at least in terms of television, to access public television in the United States? How long before you come to PBS? How long before you come to NPR and the radio? You have to go through at least probably 9 or 10 other commercial channels before you get there. So it's just a plain idea of you're being invited. It's like when you leave a grocery store and you have all the candy on the left and all the candy on the right. It's a close proximity. It's like almost in your face. Are you being invited at that point to make a last minute selection of broccoli as you go through the checkout line? No, you're being invited to get Tic Tacs or Reese's peanut butter cups or a stick of chapstick. That's what we're trying to understand here in terms of the landscape of media availability in the country that you're looking at. So when you focus your country media post today, I want you to focus on what are people in your country, what is the audience invited to gain meaning-wise from the available offerings? What are they invited to gain meaning-wise in terms of violence, in terms of sexuality, in terms of education, in terms of information? There's a difference between information and education. In terms of entertainment, in terms of competition, in terms of the way that you can categorize the content that's available in your country. You're experts now. You've been studying media content in your country for the whole semester, so you have a good idea of how you can categorize what the average person in that country is invited by the media offerings to think about meaning-wise when they're looking at the media content. When you do your research today, I'd like you to focus on if you can determine if there are studies out there that talk about the audiences in your country. You can use some quantitative data. You can use that if you want to in helping to bolster your research into how audiences have been studied in your foreign country. And as a final bonus in this class, if you use the word hippopotamus in your post today, I'm going to give you a perfect post. How's that for seeing if you've watched this video all the way to the end? Have a great day.